Here's what's coming up on today's show.
Have you ever bought something and you go, this one's way cheaper than the other? But when you get it home, like our son just bought a car, he got a really good deal, but when he got home, he says, I think this thing needs a clutch. And I'm like, oh, it hasn't even cooled off in the driveway, and you already know that you got to spend money. But that type of thing. So you've got to look at it and what's the value for the money spent?
Welcome to the How Money Works podcast with Craig and Jennifer Moser of Maestro Wealth Advisors, serving you throughout the Triad of North Carolina for more than 30 years.
Well, let's get into some financial half-truths this week on the show, guys.
Half-truths.
Half-truths. So
yeah, and it really is. I mean, before we get into this, though, it's important because this is a cool story about half-truths or making sure that people have the complete picture before they make a decision. So take a listen. A man in New Hampshire recently showed up at an animal shelter saying that he wanted to surrender 150 mice. But then he clarified that he actually really meant 150 containers of mice.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, my gosh.
So by the time he was done bringing the mice in, he delivered nearly 1,000 mice to the shelter. So maybe they shouldn't have said yes, which is now overwhelmed with trying to care for these rodents because you know what mice do?
Yeah.
They
Quickly.
Reproduce continually.
Yeah.
Are there any snakes at this place?
I don't know. That would be good. There's some fat snakes now.
Why would you have 150 containers of mice? But okay.
Yeah, that's a question unto itself.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't know. Maybe it was supposed to be a medical
yeah, maybe.
testing
But
or
that's a
something.
good point to Jen's kind of bringing that up. It's like, okay, they kind of got like half the story, right? And then it
Right.
kind of bit him in the tush, when they found out exactly what he meant. And I think that's the point with these statements financially, guys, is they're not maybe necessarily trying to mislead, but
Right.
just a simple statement doesn't cover the whole story, right? So let's dive into it. You guys break it down. You guys give us both sides, I guess, give us all the truths on these different topics. So whoever wants to tackle this first, don't worry about those losses because the market always comes back in the long run.
That's a true statement.
Right.
But where are you at in your life? I'll give an example in a minute. And do you have enough time to wait for the value of those assets to come back up? So think about it. People we work with are in all different stages of life. So I'm going to do two. Some of them are young. So retirement might be 20 or 30 years from now. And while you're working, you have a paycheck and you're adding to your retirement accounts probably about every 2 weeks or so. When a market decline occurs, well, that's when you should be adding to your investments when the price of stocks go down.
They're on
and
sale.
They're low. That's right. I mean, Warren Buffett 101. You buy when things are low, you sell when things are high. Well, turn this around. Conversely, when someone enters into retirement, look, Ma, no paycheck. You're now reliant on either pension, Social Security, or some sort of cash flow, like a real estate, or your money that you have saved. So when you enter into retirement and you are using the money you've saved for that retirement, taking money out of an investment when prices are low can be a really bad idea. I mean, bad idea because not only did you need the same amount that you needed, that doesn't change, but the value of the account that you were taking the money out of went down. Well, that can damage your future. So investing for distribution from your savings honestly requires a different approach. It really does. You need, and I do this a lot, and I'm sorry if people roll their eyes when they hear it, but you need three things. You need liquid safe money for expenses you're going to have upcoming in the, say, next 1 to 3 years. Can you really take the risk of that value going down if you know you're going to spend it the next 1, 2, or 3 years? And from my view, you can't. So let's put it in something that's not going to go down. Maybe you have to give up some upside if it goes up, but you don't have to give up downside if it goes down. Liquid. So the second thing is you need cash flow. So you might not use this cash flow today, but this is the thing that replenishes your safe bucket. Think about it. You've got money interest coming in from bonds and structured income notes. You've got dividends from your stocks. Maybe you have some real estate that's paying you some money. Do you have an annuity that has a guaranteed income rider and it's writing you a check every single month? All of these things are cash flow, and so that's there to either pay you now, but hopefully to replace the money spent from the safe stuff. if you understand what I'm saying. You can see it visually. Don't close your eyes if you're driving, but if you can see it in the way that I see it, you have those two things that are fairly safe cash flow items or something you're going to spend in the next 1 to 3 years. And then you also need money invested for growth, because guess what? Things are going to go up in cost over time. You're going to need money for maybe 20 to 30 years. And so what you want is some long-term investment where you use the money, when the prices are up. Think about it. You sell when the prices are up, you buy when prices are down. That's what you can do with your growth portfolio. But if you're using that for income, there's a lot of volatility in stock. Honestly, there's a lot of volatility in real estate, although you might, really not see it, but it's still there. So this idea is sort of like, building a house. The foundation would be your safe funds for near-term expenses. The walls would be the income, the cash flow. It's what pays the bills long-term. Your roof is the growth part. Maybe that's a little far-fetched, but it's the growth piece, and you may live 20 or 30 years in retirement, so you need your money to outpace inflation. So that's stock and real estate. I don't know what else there would be, but that's how you should design your retirement. And if you're looking at how much money do I need in safe, how much do you need in the next 2 or 3 years? That's the answer, that you're going to actually spend. And then as you look forward, you can design a portfolio that actually will work for you and not carry that same risk of just being, say, in a pie chart and it's all growth and you did really good for the last 2 years. I promise you that there's going to be a negative year or two coming up.
Let's see if we can get to another half-truth, Craig, and that is the fees in your portfolio are less than 1%.
Well, maybe so. That might be true. It depends on what's in that account. Let's say that the advisor that you're working with, you get them all the time, the guy that mails you the stuff and says for $500,000 and he has a fee, to manage that money. What are they buying? Are they buying mutual funds? Are they buying ETFs? Those types of things also have fees. So if you're trying to ask me how much would a mutual fund charge you, it depends on whether there's a human running it or not. So if it's an index, I can say Vanguard on the radio, I guess. Vanguard has the S&P 500, the Vanguard 500 fund. They're just buying an index. Nobody makes a decision to buy a stock or sell a stock. Is this good? Is this bad? All they're doing is using that index, and they're saying this is what you own every day. It's a pretty good choice, but given that, it's very cost effective. But if you go and say, okay, I'm going to buy a mutual fund and I want a person making a buy and sell decision, that's going to cost something because people don't work for free most of the time. So when you're looking at that, you go, okay, I have these other things in my account, or you actually have real stocks and real bonds in your account, and so you're not paying for that. You have to take a look. I'll look at annuities. Now, there are 3 or 4 different types of annuities. The one I'm going to talk about right now is a variable annuity. So that means that at its heart, the investment components are going to look like mutual funds. They're called sub-accounts, but let's just sort of use those words interchangeably and say, how much are they charging for the growth fund of blah, 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 blah? How much do they charge inside of that annuity for it? So figure maybe 60 basis points. Do they have a mortality and expense charge? Figure another 1 to 1.3%. Does it have a death benefit rider? There's a lot of things on there. Everything has a cost in there, so you need to be aware. Your 401k, guess what? Not free. We just did one. It was a good size account that they rolled over, but their internal fees on their mutual funds were about $6,000. They didn't know that because you can't see it. But if I could say names, I could tell you about what they charge for their expense ratio or their management fee in there. There's a cost to pretty much everything. So, Jennifer says it a lot. If you're going to pay for something, what do you get for money spent? It's not just which one's the cheapest. Have you ever bought something and you go, this one's way cheaper than the other? But when you get it home, like our son just bought a car. He got a really good deal, but when he got home, he says, I think this thing needs a clutch. And I'm like, oh, it hasn't even cooled off in the driveway, and you already know that you got to spend money. But that type of thing. So you've got to look at it and what's the value for the money spent.
Let's break down a couple more here, whoever wants to tackle this one. If you have that low interest rate on your mortgage, which many of us did from a few years ago, maybe not so much recently, you're better off to invest that money instead of paying off the house early. A lot of people feel we get emails about this a lot saying, hey, I think I've got enough money to pay off the house and my mortgage rate's really low. What's the best thing to do with that, right? So what do you think?
I'm going to tackle this first, Craig, because this is kind of like we have different opinions on this, I think.
Okay.
And mathematically, yes, it probably does make sense to go ahead and, arbitrage. So you're borrowing at a lower rate than potentially you're investing. But emotionally, it may not be the best decision. I know that a lot of people feel more confident and comfortable once they know that the house has been paid off and they don't have that burden on them anymore, and no one can take the house, nothing can happen to them, and they can keep the house without the payment. The thing I would caution on, are you really investing the difference is one question, and you're really making the difference in that spread between the lending rate and what you're earning. We're almost seeing that finish line on that paying that mortgage off, and it just tickles me to death. So I can see where people would want that off of them, especially going into retirement, because then they don't have that payment. They don't have to worry about how am I going to come up with it. If it's coming out of my investment portfolio, and that investment portfolio is pre-tax, and is that going to create a tax burden and liability? A lot of things to think about in that regard.
Well, you stole what I was going to say there at the end. You were doing just fine.
I do it all
until
the time.
So, like she said, where are you in your life? If you're 45 and you've got a low interest rate on your house and you're not willing to sell it, and then go into a higher mortgage rate, fine, just make the payments and pay it off sequentially. But if it's as you get in, say, to that last 5 or 6 years toward retirement, think about this. Do you want to cruise into retirement and say your income goal is $100,000 and then you're giving 24,000 of it to a mortgage every year? The answer is probably no. So we can look at that mortgage and we can say, here's how much extra you would have to accelerate that payment to get this thing done by the time you quit work. So that's kind of a milestone. Can we do that? And then, you also look at the money that you have accumulated for retirement, and maybe you're set. Maybe you're where you need to be, and we can back off your savings perhaps to just your match money and take that extra $1 or $2 that you're saving and put it into your mortgage payments, and we can find a way to get that thing done faster. It doesn't mean that you have to do that, but like Jennifer said, as you cruise into retirement, it's nice not to have that mortgage hanging over your head.
It is. And kind of on the flip side, I know we kind of go back and forth, but on the flip side, Craig, we've got clients that have come and they are like, well, should I take 150 out of my 250 portfolio to pay off my mortgage? And I love your comment is, think about it. If you took that 150 and paid off your house, but you need that money, are you going to sell a room? Are you going to sell part of a couch? I mean, how do you liquidate some of that money in your house without doing a home equity loan or whatever to generate, that cash if you need it? You can't sell a portion of that.
So don't try this at home kind of thing. Let's go through and run these numbers.
Right.
Let's say, does this work? Once we've put it out on the table and we've actually looked at it from an objective perspective, rather than doing something that maybe somebody else said they did and you're only getting the half truth on it and you don't know what the other side of the deal was.
And the whole truth is looking at your entire picture, which is only a financial planner can do when they actually make these advice and recommendations to you. So what about diversification is the key, Craig?
The key.
Why is that a half truth?
Is it the key? The skeleton key?
The key.
The
Right.
key.
Oh, we're a little cute here now, everybody. Now, the diversification is important. You don't want to have a single asset. I'll give you I used to work for somebody at a big firm, and it was a nice firm, and I enjoyed working there before we started our own business back in 2012. During the 2008 fiasco, I saw a lady that I saw many times come down the hall and see another advisor. And so I asked one time, I said, she seems pretty happy. She said, yeah, she's got 300,000 shares of Wachovia stock paying a 6% dividend. What's not to like? And I'm like, wow, that's pretty good income, And then I saw her collapse in the hallway because all she had was Wachovia stock, and it went to $1, and she didn't get her dividend, and it was a disaster for her because all the eggs were in that one basket. The other side of it is you don't just have to have the pie chart, the wheel of fortune, if you will. It can be a good portfolio that has different assets in it, but it doesn't have to be 4,000 stocks in each asset class, if you know what I mean, the mutual fund thing. So make sure that you run an actual retirement plan. How do I make this work? Which block of my money needs to be safe? Which block of my money needs to be producing income for me? Which part of my money is set up for future growth that I can leave alone for maybe 5 years if I don't need it, and build a portfolio that way, in my opinion.
Yeah, so diversification isn't the key. It's a component to a well-planned and sound retirement plan to get you through retirement. So,
very true. Very true. Right. If you're talking about all these different kinds of pieces, financial half-truths, guys, let's do at least one more here. Okay. Bonds. Significantly reduce the risk in your portfolio. Once upon a time, I guess this was true, right? But is it a half-truth now, or what's the deal?
Well, I don't know. If you look back to say, the end of 2022, bonds got decimated. But if you look throughout my career, with the exception of maybe 2005, because Greenspan did the briefcase thing about 11 times that year, and
what's the briefcase thing?
Oh, where he changed interest rates.
Okay, all right.
And so, very seldom do bonds go down in value. Very seldom. So that's kind of a truth. But, when you're looking at it, you've got to understand where they fit in your account. I love bonds. Jennifer, when I met her, was at the bond department at a big bank. So we're used to these types of investments, and we understand what we're supposed to do with them. Owning bonds means that you own something that's going to write you a check. They're not appreciation vehicles. So they're supposed to be less volatile than a stock, just by the pure nature of it. So if you don't own them in a mutual fund or something like that, you have something that has a start date and an end date. You have something that's supposed to either write you a check twice a year or some periodic payment in that year. And eventually when they mature, you get all of the money back that you originally put into the bond, or maybe a little bit more if you bought it at a discount. But the whole idea is that it's part of a portfolio. Yes, it does reduce volatility most of the time, but as using that as a standard, you have to be careful and know what you're buying. And the things that really got damaged in the 20 to 22 time were the mutual funds, because over years of low interest rate investments, what had happened is, we'll just use the bond aggregate. I think Barclays runs it now, but it's the bond aggregate. It was full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of low interest bearing bonds, because that's what had been happening since '08. And there was, when they raised rates, they became worth less. Not worthless, but worth less than what they originally were worth. And if you're not going to wait for them to mature, you have to pay attention to it and know what you're doing with the bonds, I guess is the easiest way to say it.
So I think the last half-truth would be, you are working with a retirement expert. And I think the thing is, I would say that is kind of a half-truth. And I think you might be working with a financial advisor that has experience with those who are retiring. But just like, a doctor practices and they're practicing because they're perfecting they're perfecting their craft and their specialty. Financial advisors and financial planners are very similar in that they are practicing this craft and bringing their talents to bear for that client in the retirement space. I would say you need to really look at the credentialing and the experience behind the financial advisor that you're working with. Are they insurance only? Are they broker dealer? Are they advisor under management? Are they able to create a plan pulling on all the disciplines and work with your CPA and your attorney to create a comprehensive, holistic plan that you benefit from? Those are the things that I would think would be more of a full truth of where you need to be with your financial affairs and who you're working with.
Well, we feel like we fit that bill. We don't have, we're not just fee only. We're not just commission. We don't just do insurance or whatever. We have all of those tools in our basket, and we use those, to fulfill the goals that you have. We don't just have one set of rules that we follow. So, that's the part, I guess, with the insurance only thing. My comment is everybody that they're looking for looks like a nail because they're a hammer. They don't have another thing in their tool bag that they can use. And so I recommend that you work with somebody that has the investment capability and experience, and also all of the other insurance pieces, and somebody that can tie it together by being able to do a comprehensive retirement or financial plan for you, specifically built along the guidelines that you're going to say things that you need to get you to and through retirement.
Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you have any questions about what we've discussed, remember, you can get a complimentary financial review with the team at Maestro Wealth Advisors by calling 336-448-1086 or go online to howmoneyworksradio.com for other great resources and ways to reach the team. You can also check the show notes of today's episode for our contact information as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the most popular apps. For Craig and Jennifer Moser, I'm Mark Killian. We'll talk to you next time on the How Money Works podcast.
Craig Moser is a financial advisor and certified financial planner. Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through Avantax Affiliated Insurance Agency.